I adjusted my pearl necklace one final time and steadied my trembling hands before walking into the marble-floored foyer of our Beverly Hills mansion, where my husband of 14 years was about to introduce his mistress as my replacement, in front of our closest family and friends. "Meet the new Mrs. Harrison," Marcus would announce with that cold, calculating smile I'd never seen before tonight, completely unaware that the CEO appointment papers sitting in my father's briefcase would turn his arrogant declaration into the biggest mistake of his life. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The irony wasn't lost on me as I smoothed down my emerald silk dress, the same one Marcus had bought me for our anniversary last year, back when I still believed his late-night client meetings and weekend golf tournaments were legitimate. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration dinner for Marcus's promotion to senior vice president at Kellerman Industries, the tech empire my father had quietly built over 3 decades in Silicon Valley. Our Malibu estate buzzed with the familiar energy of another one of our legendary dinner parties. The scent of Chef Antonio's famous truffle risotto drifted from the kitchen, while I arranged white orchids, Marcus's favorites, in crystal vases throughout our open-concept living space. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Pacific Ocean. Below, its waves catching the last golden rays of California sunset. "Isabella, darling, did you set out the Bordeaux?" called my mother-in-law, Patricia, from the wine cellar. Marcus specifically requested the 2015 vintage for tonight's special announcement. She emerged carrying 2 bottles, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer pantsuit reflecting her status as Pasadena society royalty. "All taken care of," I replied, adjusting the final orchid stem with practiced precision. Patricia had always been particular about presentations, a trait her son had inherited along with his ruthless ambition. Tonight felt different, though. There was an electricity in the air that made my skin prickle with unease. Marcus was upstairs changing from his tennis whites, unusually delayed from his Saturday match at the Riviera Country Club. Lately, those tennis sessions had stretched, longer and longer, always with important networking opportunities that somehow never translated into deals I could verify. I'd chosen to trust him, despite the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his polo shirts and the mysterious charges on our credit card statements. Our 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, raced through the dining room in her favorite pink sundress, nearly toppling my carefully arranged centerpiece of peonies and eucalyptus. "Mama, Daddy's bringing a surprise guest," she announced breathlessly, her dark curls bouncing as she ran toward the kitchen. "He said she's someone very important." I followed more slowly, catching my reflection in the hallway's antique mirror. At 35, I still maintained the figure that had first caught Marcus's attention at Stanford Business School, though laugh lines now framed my eyes, lines earned through years of supporting his career while putting my own MBA dreams on hold to raise Sophia. Tonight, instinct had whispered, warnings I couldn't quite articulate. I'd taken extra care with my appearance, choosing the emerald dress that complemented my olive complexion and styling my long black hair in the elegant updo Marcus preferred for important occasions. The sound of expensive leather shoes on marble announced Marcus's arrival downstairs. Through the kitchen window, I watched him emerge from our circular driveway in his silver Porsche, stepping out with the confident stride of a man who believed the world owed him everything. But he wasn't alone. A statuesque blonde emerged from the passenger seat, her designer dress clearly costing more than most people's monthly salary. She moved with the calculated grace of someone accustomed to being admired, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on Marcus's arm as they approached our front door. "Sophia," I said carefully, kneeling to meet my daughter's curious gaze, "why don't you help Grandma Patricia with the appetizers in the kitchen?" My father appeared at my elbow with his usual quiet presence. At 62, Dr. Rafael Castellanos still commanded rooms with his understated authority, his steel gray eyes missing nothing. As the founder and chairman of Kellerman Industries, he'd built his reputation on reading people's character with surgical precision. "That's not a business colleague," he observed flatly, watching through the window as Marcus laughed at something the woman whispered in his ear. "Dad, I started, but he raised his weathered hand gently. "You don't need to explain anything to me, Mija," he said quietly, using my childhood nickname. "But you should know that the board meeting scheduled for Monday has been moved to tomorrow morning. Emergency session." Before I could ask what he meant, the doorbell chimed with its familiar Westminster melody. Through the glass panels, I could see Marcus straightening his tie while the blonde checked her reflection in our security camera's lens. My brother Diego arrived simultaneously through the back entrance, still wearing his Lakers jersey from the game he'd attended with his wife Carmen. At 38, Diego had inherited our father's sharp business instincts along with his protective streak. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "Where's Sophia?" he asked immediately. "Kitchen with Patricia," I replied, grateful for his presence. As I walked toward the front door, my father's hand briefly touched my shoulder. "Remember, Isabella, you're a Castellanos. We don't break under pressure." I nodded, drew a deep breath, and opened the door to whatever Marcus believed he was about to unleash on our family, completely unaware that my father's briefcase contained documents that would transform this evening from Marcus's moment of triumph into his ultimate downfall. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. The first real warning sign had appeared 3 months ago, though I'd dismissed it at the time. Marcus had started working later, claiming the Kellerman Industries merger with European tech firms required round-the-clock coordination across time zones. His explanations were always detailed and plausible. Conference calls with Munich at midnight, client dinners that stretched until dawn, weekend strategy sessions that conveniently fell during Sophia's ballet recitals and school events. "Isabella, you have to understand the pressure I'm under," he'd said one evening in April, loosening his Hermes tie as he finally arrived home at nearly 11 o'clock. "This promotion to senior VP isn't just handed out. I'm competing against Harvard MBAs who'd sell their mothers for this opportunity." I'd believed him because I wanted to. Because Marcus Harrison, the ambitious young executive I'd fallen for at Stanford, had always been driven. His hunger for success was what had attracted me initially, that unwavering focus that transformed him from a middle-class kid from Phoenix into one of Silicon Valley's rising stars. But the Marcus I'd married would never have missed Sophia's birthday party in May, claiming an emergency client crisis that mysteriously resolved itself the moment his alleged meeting ended. When I'd called his office that evening, his assistant Jennifer had seemed genuinely confused. "Client crisis?" "Mr. Harrison left at noon saying he had a family commitment," she'd told me, her voice puzzled through the phone. He specifically cleared his afternoon calendar. The lie had hit me like ice water. Where had he been for 6 hours while Sophia waited for her daddy to come home and help her blow out her candles? The credit card statements had been the next breadcrumb in the trail I'd tried desperately not to follow. Charges at Le Bernardin in Manhattan, a restaurant we'd never visited together. A weekend at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay that coincided with his supposed business conference in Sacramento. Most damning of all, jewelry purchases from Tiffany & Co. that had never appeared in my jewelry box. The company has corporate accounts at these places, Marcus had explained smoothly when I'd finally gathered the courage to ask. Client entertainment, team building exercises. You know how it works in tech. Relationships are everything. Patricia had noticed the changes too, though she'd approached the subject with characteristic delicacy during our monthly lunch at the Polo Lounge. Marcus seems stressed lately, she'd observed, cutting her niçoise salad with surgical precision. Has he mentioned anything about work pressures? He was quite short with your father at the charity gala last week. I'd made excuses then, attributing his behavior to the intensity of climbing the corporate ladder at Kellerman Industries. But Patricia's concerned expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced either. The real turning point had come 3 weeks ago during Sophia's soccer practice. I'd been chatting with other parents when Rebecca Chen, whose husband worked in mergers and acquisitions, had made an offhand comment that froze my blood. "Oh, Marcus has excellent taste," she'd said, nodding toward the field where Sophia was practicing her penalty kicks. "That young woman he was with at Nobu last Thursday was absolutely stunning. European, maybe? Very sophisticated." My smile had felt like cracked porcelain. "Probably a client," I'd managed. "Marcus meets with international partners frequently." But Rebecca's knowing look suggested she'd recognized something I was trying desperately to ignore. The way she'd said young woman with that particular emphasis, the description of sophistication that implied intimacy rather than business, it all painted a picture I'd been too afraid to examine closely. Diego had been the first family member to voice what everyone was thinking. During our family barbecue 2 Sundays ago, he'd cornered me while Marcus was inside, taking yet another urgent phone call. "Bella, I love you, and I'm going to say this. Once," my brother had said quietly, using my childhood nickname. "Whatever's going on with Marcus, Dad knows. And when Dad knows something, he doesn't just sit on it. He plans." "What do you mean?" I'd asked, though part of me already understood. "I mean, Dad didn't build Kellerman Industries by ignoring character flaws in the people around him. If Marcus thinks he can play games with our family—" Diego had shrugged, but his expression was grim. "Well, let's just say Dad has resources Marcus doesn't know about." The phone calls had intensified this past week. Marcus would disappear into his home office for hours, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough through the mahogany doors to confirm he wasn't discussing quarterly projections or market strategies. The tone was too intimate, too warm. The voice of a man planning something he believed was clever. Yesterday, I'd finally done something that went against every principle of trust I'd tried to maintain in our marriage. While Marcus showered, I'd glanced at his phone and seen a text thread that made my stomach drop. "Looking forward to tomorrow night, darling. Time to make it official. V." His response had been equally telling. "She has no idea what's coming. By Sunday, everything will be different." Now, standing in our foyer as Marcus approached with his mystery guest, those warning signs crystallized into terrifying clarity. The blonde woman on his arm wasn't a colleague or client. She was Vanessa, the marketing consultant he'd mentioned in passing over the past few months. And based on their body language, their shared glances, and the proprietary way she touched his arm, she was far more than that. My father appeared beside me again, his presence oddly comforting as we watched Marcus fish for his keys. "Ready, mija?" he asked quietly. I wasn't sure if he meant ready for dinner, ready for whatever announcement Marcus was planning, or ready for the battle that was clearly about to begin. But as I smoothed my emerald dress one final time and prepared to open our front door, I realized that 35 years as Rafael Castellanos' daughter had prepared me for exactly this moment. "I'm ready, Dad," I replied, and meant it completely. "I understand perfectly. Proceeding with part 3, where the revelation on betrayal unfolds. I'll make sure to keep it 800, 1,000 words and avoid any overlapping with the previous parts." The front door opened with the soft whoosh of our home's climate, control system, and Marcus stepped inside with his characteristic confidence, one hand on the small of his mystery guest's back in a gesture that immediately confirmed my worst fears. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet someone very special," Marcus announced, his voice carrying that particular tone he used during board presentations, confident, commanding, and completely assured of his audience's reception. "This is Vanessa Whitmore, and she's about to become a very important part of our lives." The woman beside him was even more striking up close. Tall and willowy with platinum blonde hair styled in loose waves, she wore a midnight blue cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly household budget. Her smile was perfectly practiced, the kind that suggested she was accustomed to walking into rooms and claiming them. "What a lovely home," Vanessa said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of a European accent, French perhaps, or Belgian. "Marcus has told me so much about your traditional family gatherings." The word traditional dripped with subtle condescension, as if she found our Sunday family dinners charmingly quaint rather than genuinely meaningful. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, her hostess instincts overriding whatever confusion she felt about this unexpected guest. "How wonderful to meet you, dear. Marcus, you didn't mention you were bringing someone tonight." It was a last-minute decision, Marcus replied smoothly, helping Vanessa out of her designer coat. "I thought it was time everyone met the woman who's been revolutionizing my perspective on life." My father stepped forward from his position near the staircase, and I watched Vanessa's eyes widen slightly as she took in his imposing presence. At 6'2", with silver hair and the kind of understated elegance that came from real power rather than pretense, Rafael Castellanos commanded attention without effort. "Mr. Castellanos," Marcus said, his voice taking on the deferential tone he always used with my father, "I'd like you to meet Vanessa. Vanessa, this is Isabella's father, the founder of Kellerman Industries." Vanessa extended her hand with practiced grace. "Such an honor, Mr. Castellanos. Marcus speaks of you constantly. Your vision, your leadership, your influence in the industry." My father accepted her handshake with polite neutrality, but I caught the almost imperceptible way his eyes narrowed, cataloging details. "Ms. Whitmore, and what brings you to our family dinner tonight?" Before Vanessa could answer, Marcus wrapped his arm around her waist in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. "Actually, Dad, that's what I wanted to discuss tonight, in front of everyone." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Diego moved closer to where Carmen stood near the kitchen entrance, his protective instincts clearly activated. Patricia's silver serving spoon clattered against the marble countertop in the sudden silence. "Marcus," I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt. "Perhaps we should sit down for dinner first, and then—" "No, Isabella," he interrupted, his tone carrying an edge I'd never heard directed at me before. "I think it's better to address this directly, honestly." He turned to face our assembled family, Vanessa still tucked against his side like a trophy. "I know this might come as a surprise, but Vanessa and I have been collaborating for the past several months. She's been instrumental in helping me realize what I really want out of life." Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the unusual tension in adult voices. Carmen quickly scooped her up, murmuring something about checking on the dessert preparation, but not before my daughter's confused eyes took in the scene. "What kind of collaboration?" Patricia asked, her voice tight with maternal concern. Marcus's smile was the one I'd seen him use during hostile corporate negotiations, confident, predatory, and completely without warmth. "The kind that's made me understand I've been settling for comfortable mediocrity instead of pursuing real happiness." "Settling?" The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Isabella, please don't make this harder than it needs to be," Marcus said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that suggested I was being unreasonably emotional. "We've both known for years that we've grown apart. We want different things now." Vanessa stepped slightly forward, her smile sympathetic, but her eyes calculating. "I hope you'll understand, Isabella. Sometimes people simply outgrow their circumstances. Marcus needs someone who can match his ambitions, who understands the demands of real success." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. She was standing in my home, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's rent, essentially calling me insufficient while my family watched. "Real success?" Diego's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "And what exactly do you know about Marcus's ambitions, Ms. Whitmore?" "More than you might think," she replied smoothly. "I've been working closely with Marcus on some strategic planning. For his future, our future." Marcus straightened, clearly preparing for his grand finale. "The truth is, I've accepted a position with Whitmore International, Vanessa's family's company in Switzerland. It's an incredible opportunity, the kind of global leadership role I've always wanted. He looked directly at me, his expression a mixture of pity and dismissal. I'll be relocating next month, and Vanessa will be taking your position. As my partner, as my wife, as the mother figure Sophia needs for her development. The audacity of it struck me speechless. He was announcing his abandonment of our marriage, his plans to steal our daughter, and his new relationship all in one brutal declaration, delivered in front of our family like a corporate presentation. Taking my position? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't be dramatic, Isabella, Marcus said with that insufferable smirk. You'll get a generous settlement, of course, enough to maintain a comfortable lifestyle while you figure out what you want to do next. In the horrible silence that followed, I became aware of my father's presence beside me. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but something had changed in his posture. When I glanced at him, his expression was utterly calm, the kind of calm that had preceded every major business victory in his career. How interesting, my father said, quietly, his voice carrying just enough volume to command absolute attention. Marcus, before you continue with your announcement, there's something I think you should know about Monday morning's board meeting. Marcus's confident smirk faltered for just a moment at my father's words, but he quickly recovered, waving a dismissive hand. The board meeting can wait, Raphael. This is about family, not business. Oh, but I think you'll find they're more connected than you realize, my father replied, his voice maintaining that deceptively calm tone that I'd learned to recognize as deeply dangerous. The immediate aftermath of Marcus's announcement felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. Patricia stood frozen by the kitchen entrance, her face cycling through emotions, shock, disappointment, and something that looked suspiciously like fury. Diego had positioned himself protectively near. Me? His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching. Let me understand this correctly, Patricia said finally, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. You brought this woman to our family dinner to announce you're abandoning your wife and daughter? I'm not abandoning anyone, Marcus replied, his tone growing defensive. I'm making a mature decision about my future. Isabella will be well provided for, and Sophia will have opportunities she could never access otherwise. Vanessa squeezed his arm supportively. We understand this is difficult, but children are remarkably adaptable. Sophia will thrive in Switzerland. The schools there are world-class, and she'll be exposed to a much more sophisticated cultural environment. The casual way she discussed uprooting my daughter's entire life, as if Sophia were a business asset to be relocated, ignited something fierce. In my chest, sophisticated cultural environment? I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. She's 8 years old, Marcus. Her friends are here, her school, her grandparents. Exactly my point, Marcus interrupted. She's young enough to adapt easily. Children who grow up internationally develop a global perspective that will serve her well in the future. Whose future? I asked sharply. Hers or yours? Carmen reappeared from the kitchen, having successfully distracted Sophia. With the promise of helping frost cupcakes, she shot me a meaningful look. Our daughter was safely occupied, at least for the moment. Marcus, my father said quietly, I'm curious about the timeline of your decision. When exactly did you accept this position with Whitmore International? Something flickered across Marcus's face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or calculation. The offer came together recently. Sometimes opportunities arise that require immediate action. How recently? Diego pressed. Because Isabella mentioned you've been working. Late for months, claiming projects for Kellerman Industries. Vanessa's perfectly composed expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Marcus has been consulting with us on various matters. The transition has been gradual. Consulting, I echoed, the pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. Is that what we're calling it? All those late nights, those weekend trips, those mysterious charges on our credit cards. You were consulting? Isabella, don't make this ugly, Marcus warned, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Ugly? I stood up, my composure finally cracking. You brought your mistress to our family dinner to announce you're stealing my daughter and moving. To another continent? And you're worried about me making it ugly? Former wife, Vanessa corrected softly, her smile sharp as crystal. I think it's important to be accurate about these things. The correction hit like a slap. Former wife? We're still married, in case you've forgotten. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The paperwork is being handled. My attorney assured me the process will be expedited given the circumstances. What circumstances? Patricia demanded, her maternal instincts finally overriding her shock. The circumstances of you cheating on your wife and abandoning your family? Mother, please, Marcus said, his voice strained. This isn't about betrayal. It's about growth. About pursuing something real instead of settling for... For what? I interrupted. For the wife who supported your career? For the daughter who adores you? For the family that welcomed you and helped you succeed? For a life that was becoming increasingly limiting, Vanessa answered for him, her voice honey-sweet with poison. Marcus has so much potential. He deserves a partner who can match his ambitions, who understands the demands of true success. The implication was crystal clear. I was the limitation, the anchor holding Marcus back from his destined greatness. Diego stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. And you think you understand success, Ms. Whitmore? What exactly qualifies you to judge my sister's worth? Diego, Marcus warned, this doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't, my brother snapped. This is my family you're dismantling with. Your corporate presentation. My niece you're planning to kidnap? Kidnap is a strong word, Vanessa interjected smoothly. We prefer to think of it as providing Sophia with expanded opportunities. Without consulting her mother, Carmen pointed out sharply, joining the conversation for the first time. Without considering what she wants or needs, Sophia is too young to understand the complexities, Marcus replied dismissively. She'll adjust. Children always do. The callous certainty in his voice, as if our daughter's emotional well-being was a minor variable in his grand plan, crystallized everything wrong. With this moment, this wasn't the man I'd married. The Marcus I'd fallen in love with had been ambitious, yes, but also kind, thoughtful, devoted to family. This stranger wearing his face was calculating, selfish, and utterly indifferent to the collateral damage of his choices. Have you told Sophia? I asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. We thought it would be better coming from both of us, together. Once everything is finalized. Once everything is finalized, I repeated. You mean once you've bulldozed through every objection and made your escape plans irreversible? This isn't an escape, Vanessa said, her patience clearly wearing thin. It's an elevation. Marcus deserves better than this. Suburban domesticity. Patricia made a sound that might have been a growl. Suburban domesticity? You mean a loving home, a devoted wife, and a beautiful daughter? I mean limitations, Vanessa replied coolly. Marcus is destined for international leadership, for influence and power. Isabella is, well, she's been wonderfully supportive, but she's not equipped for that level of sophistication. The insult was delivered with such polished cruelty that for a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Around me, my family bristled with collective outrage, but my father remained oddly calm, watching the exchange with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. Not equipped, I said finally, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Because I chose to support my husband's career instead of pursuing my own MBA? Because I prioritized raising our daughter. Over climbing corporate ladders? Because you lack vision, Vanessa replied with devastating simplicity. You see small picture success, comfortable homes, stable marriages, conventional happiness. Marcus sees global possibilities. It was in that moment, listening to this woman casually dismantle everything I'd built and valued, that I understood my father's strange calm. He wasn't just watching this unfold, he was letting them reveal exactly who they were, giving them enough rope to hang themselves completely. And based on the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, I suspected they were about to discover just how expensive that revelation would be. My father set down his crystal tumbler of aged whiskey with deliberate precision, the soft clink against the marble side table commanding absolute attention in the tense room. When Rafael Castellanos moved with that particular controlled grace, 40 years of business adversaries had learned to pay very close attention. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built an empire, "I find myself curious about the timeline of your elevation, as Ms. Whitmore so eloquently puts it." Marcus straightened slightly, sensing a shift in the conversation's dynamic, but not yet understanding its significance. "As I mentioned, the opportunity with Whitmore International developed organically, over recent months. Sometimes the best career moves happen when you're open to possibility." "Organically," my father repeated, savoring the word like a fine wine. "How fascinating. And this position, what level of authority does it carry?" Vanessa stepped closer to Marcus, her hand sliding possessively up his arm. "Marcus will be heading their North American expansion division. It's a role that requires someone with his particular combination of vision and adaptability." "North American expansion," Diego interjected, his tone skeptical. "I'm not familiar with Whitmore International. What sector do they operate in?" A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, or calculation, crossed Vanessa's perfect features. "We're a diversified holding company, private equity primarily, with interests across multiple industries." "Private equity," my father mused, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Vanessa's face. "And your family's background in this field?" "Generational wealth," she replied smoothly. "My grandfather established our European operations in the 1960s. "Impressive," my father said, though his tone suggested something other than admiration. "And this North American expansion, I assume you've done your due diligence on the regulatory environment? The SEC has very specific requirements for foreign investment firms operating in U.S. markets." Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "Rafael, the legal details are being handled by their international team. My role is strategic, not regulatory." "Of course," my father agreed mildly. "Still, I find myself wondering why such an established European firm would recruit talent from Kellerman Industries for an expansion role, particularly when there are so many qualified candidates with international experience already available." The question hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, while Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a tell I'd learned to recognize during our years of marriage. "Sometimes," Vanessa said carefully, "the right person transcends traditional qualifications. Marcus brings a unique perspective to our operations." "Unique perspective," Patricia repeated, her voice dripping with maternal disapproval. "Is that what we're calling home wrecking these days?" "Mrs. Harrison," Vanessa replied with practiced patience, "I understand this transition is difficult for the family, but Marcus and I connected on a professional level initially. The personal relationship developed naturally from our mutual respect and shared ambitions." "Professional level," I said quietly, my voice cutting through their polished explanations. "At which Kellerman Industries client meetings did this professional connection occur?" "Because I've attended most of the major industry events with Marcus over the past year." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Isabella, not every business interaction happens at formal events. Some of the most important connections develop through informal channels." "Informal channels," my father echoed, and now there was something predatory in his tone. Marcus, I'm curious. In your excitement about this new opportunity, have you had a chance to review Monday morning's board agenda? Monday's board meeting isn't until… Marcus began, then stopped abruptly as understanding dawned in his eyes. Until tomorrow, my father finished gently. Emergency session, called this afternoon. Funny thing about emergency board meetings, they tend to involve rather significant announcements. The color began draining from Marcus's face. Vanessa looked between them, clearly sensing the shift in power dynamics, but not yet understanding its source. What kind of announcements? She asked, her European accent becoming slightly more pronounced under stress. My father smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded the destruction of 3 major competitors over the past decade. Oh, the usual corporate restructuring matters. New leadership appointments, strategic realignments, succession planning. Succession planning, Marcus repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, indeed. My father reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a leather portfolio. It's remarkable how these things come together. For months, the board has been discussing the future of Kellerman Industries, specifically the question of who might be capable of taking over the CEO position when I step down. The portfolio opened with a soft snap, revealing official-looking documents bearing the Kellerman Industries letterhead. Even from across the room, I could see the corporate seals and signatures that marked them as legitimate board resolutions. The unanimous decision, my father continued conversationally, was reached 3 weeks ago. The announcement was scheduled for Monday to allow for proper legal documentation and SEC filings. Vanessa's perfectly composed expression cracked slightly. Mr. Castellanos, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying, Ms. Whitmore, that as of Monday morning, I will be announcing my retirement as CEO of Kellerman Industries, effective January 1st. He lifted his eyes to meet Marcus's horrified gaze. I'm also announcing the appointment of my successor. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus had gone completely white, while Vanessa's calculating mind was clearly working through the implications. Your successor, she said slowly. My daughter, my father replied with obvious pride. Isabella Castellanos Harrison. The board voted unanimously to appoint her as Chief Executive Officer, effective with my retirement. The words hit the room like a bomb. Marcus stumbled backward slightly, his confident facade crumbling as the magnitude of his miscalculation became clear. Isabella? He whispered. But she doesn't even work at the company. Doesn't she? My father asked mildly. Tell me, Marcus, who do you think has been reviewing all those strategic planning documents you've been bringing home for the past 3 years? Who's been providing the market analysis that's driven your most successful initiatives? Who's been the uncredited architect behind every major presentation you've delivered to the board? I watched understanding dawn in Marcus's eyes, followed immediately by the sickening realization of what he'd just thrown away. The MBA from Stanford, my father continued relentlessly. The 10 years of executive experience before Sophia was born, the strategic consulting work she's been doing behind the scenes. The board has been aware of Isabella's contributions for quite some time. Vanessa's perfectly manicured hands had begun to tremble slightly. But the Swiss position, Whitmore International. Ah, yes, my father said, his tone shifting to something approaching pity. I had my people look into Whitmore International this afternoon. Interesting company? Very small operation, actually. More of a consulting firm than a holding company, and not particularly solvent, based on the financial reports my team pulled. The bottom had officially fallen out of their perfect plan. Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of horror and belated recognition, while Vanessa looked like she was calculating the distance to the nearest exit. So you see, my father concluded, carefully returning the documents to his portfolio, Marcus will be free to pursue his new opportunity without any concerns about conflicting loyalties to Kellerman Industries, and Isabella will be free to focus entirely on her new responsibilities as CEO of a company worth approximately $2.8 billion. In the devastating silence that followed, I finally understood why my father had remained so calm throughout Marcus's cruel presentation. He hadn't just been letting them reveal their character. He'd been letting them destroy themselves completely before revealing that they'd just walked away from everything they'd actually wanted. The silence following my father's revelation stretched, like a taut wire about to snap. Marcus stood frozen, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and dawning horror as the magnitude of his miscalculation became undeniably clear. Beside him, Vanessa's perfectly composed mask had slipped entirely, revealing the calculating opportunist beneath. $2.8 billion, Marcus repeated, his voice hollow. Isabella, you're going to be CEO of Kellerman Industries? I nodded slowly, still processing the information myself. My father had mentioned the board meetings, the discussions about succession, but I'd assumed those conversations were theoretical, planning for some distant future. The transition period begins immediately, my father confirmed. Isabella has been shadowing board meetings remotely for the past 6 months, reviewing strategic documents, contributing to major decisions. The appointment isn't sudden. It's been carefully planned and thoroughly vetted. Vanessa stepped away from Marcus, her predatory instincts clearly reassessing the playing field. Mr. Castellanos, surely this announcement could have been made at a more appropriate time? Could it? My father asked with deceptive mildness. I thought tonight was about honesty, about revealing true intentions and character. Marcus wanted to make his priorities clear in front of the family. I simply wanted to ensure he had all the relevant information before making his final decision. Patricia had recovered from her initial shock and was now studying Marcus with the cold assessment of a woman reassessing her son's judgment. Let me understand this correctly. You're leaving Isabella, who's about to become CEO of a billion-dollar company, for a woman whose family business is apparently a failing consulting firm? It's not failing, Vanessa protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Whitmore International is simply restructuring. Restructuring? Diego laughed harshly. Is that what they're calling bankruptcy these days? Marcus ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, leaving it disheveled for the first time in years. Raphael, I had no idea about the succession planning. If I'd known Isabella was being considered for the CEO position, you would have what? I interrupted, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Stayed married to me for my career prospects? Postponed your betrayal until after you'd secured your position as the CEO's husband? The accusation hung between us like a blade. Marcus opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again as he realized how any response would damn him further. Actually, my father said thoughtfully, that raises an interesting question about the timing of Marcus's career transition. When exactly did you first make contact with Whitmore International? Vanessa and Marcus exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication that spoke volumes about their coordination. The initial contact was several months ago, Vanessa said carefully. Marcus reached out after researching European expansion opportunities. Reached out how? Carmen asked from her position near the kitchen doorway. As a forensic accountant, her training made her naturally suspicious of vague financial explanations. Through professional networking channels, Marcus replied, but his tone suggested he was improvising. LinkedIn, industry contacts, the usual platforms. My father's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. That indicated he was filing away every inconsistency for later use. And the position offer came immediately? The relationship developed over time, Vanessa said smoothly. We were impressed by Marcus's strategic thinking, his vision for international markets. His vision, I repeated, pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. The strategic documents he's been bringing home, the market analyses, the International expansion proposals. Those were my ideas, weren't they? My research, my strategic planning that he's been presenting as his own work. Marcus's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, Patricia breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. You've been stealing Isabella's work to impress your mistress? It's not stealing, Marcus protested weakly. We're married. Spouses collaborate? Spouses collaborate, Diego corrected icily. They don't plagiarize each other's professional work to seduce their affairs. Vanessa's calculating gaze shifted between Marcus and my father, clearly reassessing her position. Mr. Castellanos, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the nature of our business relationship with Marcus. Miscommunication, my father echoed. How so? Well, she said carefully, when Marcus first approached us, he presented himself as having significant influence within Kellerman Industries. He suggested he could facilitate certain business opportunities. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Marcus's face went from white to green as he realized what Vanessa was implying. What kind of business opportunities? Carmen asked, her forensic instincts fully engaged. Vanessa smiled with razor-sharp precision. Joint ventures, technology transfers, strategic partnerships. Marcus indicated he had insider knowledge of Kellerman's expansion plans and could help position Whitmore International as a preferred partner. Inside information, my father said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded corporate executions. Marcus, are you suggesting you've been sharing proprietary Kellerman Industries information with outside parties? No, Marcus protested desperately. I never shared classified information. Just general industry insights, market trends. Market trends like our Asian expansion timeline? I asked, memory flooding back. The European partnership negotiations? The merger discussions you claimed were so confidential I couldn't even know the basic details? Marcus's desperate look confirmed what I already suspected. He hadn't just been cheating on me emotionally and physically. He'd been using our marriage as cover to steal proprietary information from my father's company. This is fascinating, my father said, pulling out his phone. Marcus, I'm curious about something else. When you mentioned needing to liquidate assets quickly for your move to Switzerland, were you referring to your Kellerman Industries stock? Options. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. How did you? Because those stock options vest over 5 years, and you're only 3 years into the program. Early liquidation would trigger significant penalties unless, my father paused meaningfully, unless you had inside information suggesting the stock price was about to change dramatically. That's insider trading, Carmen said flatly. It would be, my father agreed, if someone were to liquidate their position, based on non-public information about, say, a CEO transition that might affect stock prices. Vanessa took another step away from Marcus, her self-preservation instincts clearly overriding any loyalty. Mr. Castellanos, I want to be very clear that Whitmore International has conducted all our interactions with Marcus in good faith. If he misrepresented his authority or access to information, that was without our knowledge or consent. Without your knowledge, Marcus turned to stare at her in disbelief. Vanessa, you specifically asked me about the merger timelines, the expansion. Budgets? I asked general questions about industry trends, she corrected smoothly. I had no way of knowing you were sharing confidential information. The betrayal was swift and complete. In the span of 30 seconds, Vanessa had thrown Marcus completely under the bus to protect herself and her fictitious company. So let me summarize, my father said, his voice carrying the methodical precision of a prosecutor building a case. Marcus has been stealing proprietary information from Kellerman Industries, sharing it with outside parties, plagiarizing his wife's strategic work, and planning to liquidate stock options based on inside information about executive changes. Have I missed anything? Marcus stood in the wreckage of his carefully constructed plan, betrayed by his mistress, exposed as a thief and potential criminal, having just walked away from a marriage to the future CEO of a billion-dollar company. "Raphael," he said desperately, "I can explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all," my father replied with deadly calm. "In fact, I think Monday's board meeting just became significantly more interesting." The aftermath of my father's methodical dismantling of Marcus's schemes rippled through the room like an earthquake. Marcus stood amid the wreckage of his arrogance, while Vanessa had already begun her strategic retreat, her survival instincts in full operation. "Raphael, please," Marcus said, his voice cracking with desperation. "Can we discuss this privately? I think there's been a series of unfortunate misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" Diego stepped forward, his protective instincts fully activated. "You just admitted to corporate espionage in front of witnesses. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony." Vanessa smoothed her designer dress, her composure returning as she calculated her exit strategy. "Mr. Castellanos, I believe there's been sufficient revelation for one evening. Marcus and I should probably take our leave and allow your family to process this unexpected news about Isabella's appointment." "Actually," my father said, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling rooms full of powerful people, "I think we're just getting started. You see, Ms. Whitmore, your presence here tonight has been quite illuminating." He reached for his phone again, scrolling through what appeared to be a lengthy email. "My security team completed their research on Whitmore International this afternoon. Fascinating company history." Vanessa's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the way color drained from her face. "Mr. Castellanos, I'm not sure what you think you've discovered." "I've discovered," my father continued with clinical precision, "that Whitmore International was incorporated in Switzerland exactly 4 months ago. No prior business history, no substantial assets, and most interestingly, no actual business operations beyond a registered address and a website created 3 months ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus turned to stare at Vanessa with dawning horror. "4 months?" he whispered. "But you said your grandfather established the company in the 1960s. Vanessa's mask of sophisticated confidence finally shattered completely. "The current incorporation reflects a recent restructuring of our family holdings." "Your family holdings," Patricia interrupted with venom, "which apparently consist of a fake company and a talent for seducing married men into committing corporate espionage." "Mrs. Harrison, I resent the implication." "Resent away," my father said coldly, "because the implications are about to become much more serious. You see, using a fictitious business entity to solicit proprietary information from American companies falls under several federal statutes: industrial espionage, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit securities violations. The FBI takes these matters very seriously." Marcus stumbled backward as if physically struck. "FBI? Raphael, surely this doesn't need to involve federal authorities." "Actually, it does," Carmen interjected, her forensic accounting background making her fully grasp the legal ramifications. Once foreign nationals are involved in potential securities fraud, it automatically becomes a federal matter. The penalties can include significant prison time. Vanessa's European accent became more pronounced under stress. "This is absurd. I've committed no crimes." Marcus approached me, not the other way around. "Did he?" my father asked mildly. "Because according to the metadata on these emails my team recovered from Marcus's corporate account, the initial contact came from an IP address registered in Beverly Hills, specifically from the Four Seasons Hotel where you've been staying for the past 6 months." The trap snapped shut with audible precision. Vanessa had been caught in her own lie, and everyone in the room knew it. 6 months, I said quietly, the timeline crystallizing in my mind. That's when Marcus started working late, missing family, events, becoming distant. "You've been orchestrating this seduction from the beginning." "Orchestrating?" Marcus turned to face Vanessa, his voice rising with panic and anger. "You told me you fell in love with my vision, my ambition." "I fell in love with your access to Kellerman Industries," Vanessa snapped, her patient facade finally cracking completely. "Did you really think someone like me would be interested in a middle management wannabe from Phoenix?" The cruel honesty of her statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "So the Swiss position," he said numbly, "the international expansion role, was never real," she confirmed with brutal efficiency. "Whitmore International exists solely to extract and monetize industrial intelligence. You were simply the most convenient source." Patricia gasped audibly. "You mean this entire relationship was a lie? The promises? The future together? All of it?" "All of it," Vanessa confirmed without a trace of remorse. Though I must say, Marcus made it remarkably easy. So eager to prove his worth, so willing to share confidential information to impress me. The complete destruction of Marcus's worldview played out across his face. His marriage, his family, his integrity, his career prospects, all sacrificed for a woman who had never been anything more than a sophisticated con artist. "You destroyed my life for nothing," he whispered. "I destroyed nothing," Vanessa replied coldly. "You destroyed your own life the moment you decided to betray your family for personal advancement. I simply provided the opportunity." My father's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and smiled with grim satisfaction. "Ah, perfect timing. That would be Agent Morrison from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I took the liberty of sharing our findings with them this afternoon." "FBI," Marcus repeated, his voice barely audible. "Industrial espionage carries a maximum sentence of 15 years in federal prison," my father informed them conversationally. "Of course, cooperation with authorities can sometimes result in reduced sentences." Vanessa's survival instincts kicked into overdrive. "Mr. Castellanos, I believe there's room for negotiation here. Whitmore International would be happy to make restitution for any perceived damages." "Perceived damages?" Diego laughed harshly. "You orchestrated the theft of proprietary information from a company worth nearly $3 billion. The damages are quite real. And the FBI," Carmen added helpfully, "doesn't negotiate with foreign nationals who commit crimes on American soil. They prosecute them." The sound of car doors slamming outside indicated the arrival of federal agents. Through the front windows, I could see black SUVs in our circular driveway. "This is your doing," Marcus accused my father desperately. "You orchestrated this entire evening." "I did nothing," my father replied with calm dignity, "except allow you to reveal your true character in front of witnesses. The evidence of your crimes was gathered by professionals after Kellerman Industries' security protocols detected unusual access patterns in your account 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago? I asked, understanding flooding through me. "The same time the board voted on the CEO succession," my father confirmed. Amazing how these things align. The doorbell chimed with its familiar Westminster melody, but this time, it carried the weight of federal authority. Through the glass panels, I could see agents in dark suits waiting patiently. "Isabella," my father said gently, "would you mind letting in our guests? I believe Agent Morrison would like to speak with Mr. Harrison and Ms. Whitmore about their business relationship." As I walked toward the front door, I caught sight of Sophia peering around the kitchen doorway, her young face confused by the tension and raised voices. Carmen quickly scooped her up, murmuring something about finishing those cupcakes while the adults handled some boring business matters. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa making one last desperate attempt at negotiation, while Marcus pleaded for mercy that wasn't coming. The man who had arrogantly announced my replacement an hour ago was now facing the complete destruction of his future, while the woman he'd sacrificed everything for was already calculating how quickly she could throw him under the bus to save herself. I opened the door to Agent Morrison and his team. officially beginning the next phase of what had been the most devastating and empowering evening of my life. 18 months later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 42nd floor of Kellerman Tower, watching the San Francisco Bay glitter in the afternoon sunlight. The executive suite that had once seemed impossibly distant now felt like home, its modern lines and strategic views reflecting the transformation of both the company and myself. "Mom, are you coming to my presentation?" Sophia's voice carried through the office as she bounded in wearing her school uniform, her confidence radiating the security of a child whose world had been rebuilt stronger than before. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I assured her, closing the quarterly report spread across my mahogany desk. "Tell me again what your project is about." "Female CEOs who changed their industries," she announced proudly. "I'm presenting about you and Oprah and the lady who runs YouTube. Mrs. Chen says it's important for kids to see that leadership comes in all forms." My heart swelled with pride, not just for her academic success, but for the remarkable resilience she'd shown throughout the upheaval. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the child psychologist we'd worked with, had been amazed by Sophia's ability to process the changes and emerge stronger. Diego knocked on the office doorframe, his smile carrying the easy warmth that had sustained our family through the darkest months. "Ready for the board meeting, Madam CEO?" "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, gathering the presentation materials for our quarterly review. The board that had once been an intimidating collection of industry titans now felt like trusted advisors, their initial skepticism about my unconventional path to leadership long since replaced by respect for results. Under my tenure, Kellerman Industries had exceeded every performance metric. The European expansion I'd designed, ironically based on the same strategic plans Marcus had stolen, had generated over $400 million in new revenue. Our Asian partnerships had positioned us as the premier technology consultant for emerging markets. Most satisfying of all, the employee satisfaction surveys showed unprecedented levels of engagement and loyalty. "Any word from the federal prosecutors?" Carmen asked, joining us as we headed toward the boardroom. As our new chief financial officer, she'd been instrumental in rebuilding the company's security protocols and financial oversight systems. Sentencing hearing is next month," I replied. "Marcus is expected to receive 18 months in federal prison, with 3 years of supervised probation. He'll also be required to pay full restitution to Kellerman Industries for the proprietary information he compromised." "And the European con artist?" Diego asked with undisguised satisfaction. "Vanessa received 4 years," I said. The judge wasn't impressed by her claims of cultural misunderstanding. Apparently, industrial espionage is frowned upon in every culture. The boardroom buzzed with pre-meeting conversation as we entered. Walter Harrington, who had replaced my father as board chairman after his retirement, stood to greet me with paternal warmth. "Isabella, excellent work on the Singapore acquisition," he said, referring to our recent purchase of a struggling tech firm that perfectly complemented our expansion strategy. "Your father would be proud." "He is proud," I corrected with a smile. "He told me so this morning during our weekly strategy breakfast." My father's retirement had been more ceremonial than practical. He maintained an advisory role that kept him engaged while allowing me the autonomy to establish my own leadership style. Our Sunday family dinners had resumed their central place in our lives, now featuring business discussions that treated me as an equal partner rather than Marcus's wife. "Before we begin the formal meeting," Walter announced to the assembled board members, "I wanted to share some exciting news. Harvard Business Review has selected Isabella for their Innovators Under 40 cover story, focusing on unconventional paths to corporate leadership." The applause that followed was genuine and warm. These powerful executives who had initially questioned my qualifications now championed my success with the fervor of believers in an unexpected miracle. The interview process was fascinating, I shared. They were particularly interested in how adversity can accelerate professional development. Apparently, my story is resonating with women who've subordinated their careers for family responsibilities. Patricia had become one of my strongest supporters in this narrative. My former mother-in-law now served on the board of our corporate foundation, channeling her social connections into philanthropic partnerships that enhanced Kellerman Industries' community presence. The breach of trust caused by Marcus's actions had, paradoxically, strengthened our relationship rather than destroying it. Speaking of resonating stories, Carmen interjected with barely contained excitement. Have you seen the morning news coverage about the federal task force on corporate espionage? I shook my head, having been focused on quarterly projections. Since dawn, Agent Morrison held a press conference announcing that your case led to the exposure of an entire network of fake companies targeting Silicon Valley firms. They've made 17 additional arrests across 6 states. The satisfaction that followed wasn't vengeful. It was the clean feeling of justice properly served. Marcus and Vanessa hadn't just destroyed their own futures. They'd been part of a larger criminal enterprise that threatened the innovation economy that defined our region. Has Marcus requested any communication? Walter asked gently, knowing that Sophia's relationship with her father remained a sensitive topic. He writes letters, I replied carefully. Sophia reads them when she wants to, and we discuss them with Dr. Martinez. She's decided she wants to visit him once he's transferred to the minimum security facility, but only when she feels ready. The decision to allow supervised contact had been difficult, but the child psychologist had been clear. Complete severance would likely cause more trauma than carefully managed interaction. Sophia needed to process her father's choices and consequences in her own time and way. She's remarkably wise for a 9-year-old, Diego observed. Last week she told me that people can make terrible mistakes but still deserve forgiveness eventually. Just not trust. The distinction reflected the sophisticated, emotional intelligence Sophia had developed through therapy and family support. She understood that her father's love for her could coexist with his poor choices, and that forgiveness didn't require forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from James Harrington, Walter's nephew, who had become a significant presence in our lives over the past 6 months. Good luck with the board meeting. Dinner celebration afterward? The relationship had developed slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than desperate need or calculated advantage. James understood that Sophia and my career came first, and he'd earned his place in our lives through consistent support and genuine affection. New romantic interest? Carmen teased, noticing my smile. Possibly, I admitted. But this time, I'm choosing with my eyes wide open. The lessons learned from Marcus's betrayal had fundamentally changed my approach to relationships. Trust would be earned gradually, through demonstrated character rather than declared intentions. Partnership would be based on mutual support rather than one person's subordination to another's ambitions. As the board meeting commenced, I looked around the table at faces that reflected confidence in my leadership. The journey from betrayed wife to corporate CEO had been painful but ultimately transformative. Marcus had believed he was discarding me for something better, never understanding that his betrayal would catalyze my evolution into someone far more powerful than the woman he'd married. The irony was perfect. In trying to replace me, he had actually revealed my true worth. In abandoning our family for fictional opportunities, he had cleared the path for authentic success. In choosing calculated deception over genuine partnership, he had demonstrated the difference between real leadership and empty ambition. That evening, as Sophia and I reviewed her presentation about female CEOs over dinner, she asked the question that had been building for months. Mom, are you happy that Dad left? I considered the question carefully, understanding its complexity and importance. I'm sad that he made choices that hurt our family, I replied honestly, but I'm grateful for the opportunities that opened up because of those choices. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things about our lives. Sophia nodded solemnly, then brightened. Like how you became the boss of everything. Because he was mean to us? Something like that, I agreed, pulling her close. But mostly, I'm happy that we learned how strong we are when we support each other. Outside our dining room windows, the lights of Silicon Valley sparkled like stars, each one representing dreams, ambitions, and the endless possibility of transformation. Marcus had believed he was writing the ending of our story that night, 18 months ago. Instead, he had simply provided the beginning of something far more extraordinary than either of us had ever imagined possible. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey.